The next speaker is one of the very, very welcome new faces in the Parliament, representing a party that was previously unrepresented in Parliament and also Vice Chair of CND. Please welcome Caroline Lucas, everybody.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to be on this incredibly important debate tonight, because I think the context of this debate is a truly devastating one. That we've got a combination of a massively brutal budget statement, which will have savage cuts, as we know, to public services. That we've got a failing war in Afghanistan, leading to a particularly terrible death toll this month in particular. And then an incredibly willful refusal to include Trident in the Strategic Defence Review, a decision really akin to deciding to go on a diet but then deciding not to count cake and chocolate in your overall calorie consumption. It is completely stupid. But I want to spend a few words on the budget first of all, because that is the context in a sense which I think gives our arguments about Afghanistan and our arguments about Trident even more resonance and even more leverage and even more of an opportunity to get these issues much, much higher up the political agenda where they deserve to be. And I'm sure you are every bit as fed up as the rest of us are about hearing that this budget was, number one, unavoidable, and number two, fair. You know, I think we have to challenge that at every moment and make it very, very clear that these cuts were not some economic inevitability. They were an ideological choice. And right through this, there have been ideological choices that have been taken which have never been debated publicly, or even as far as I can see very much in Parliament before the budget was given either. So we've already had the issue about, do we need to be making cuts in any case right now? Is it not the case, as others have said here tonight, that if you make those kinds of savage cuts, we very much risk triggering the double-dip recession, particularly given the rest of Europe is doing exactly the same thing. And if we're not careful, we will find ourselves with even more of the problems, even more unemployment, even more of a recession. So first of all, we need to be listening to those people like David Blanchflower, the one member of the Bank of England's Monetary Committee who saw this recession coming and warned against the very measures which the Bank of England's committee then took and which then helped trigger the recession that we've seen here in Britain as well. So let's listen to people like that, listen to people like Joseph Stiglitz, a Nobel Prize winner on economics, who again is warning against making these kinds of cuts. Even Obama warning against it, even though David Cameron likes to try to paper it all over at the Toronto summit to make it sound as if everybody is saying the same thing. They are not. So first of all, we don't even need to be making these cuts. And number two, if we were to be wanting to raise revenue now, there are very many other ways of doing it. And of course, all of the discussions we've been hearing about the choice to cut child benefit, for example, and in return to allow VAT to rise. All of those are deliberate political choices that we have to challenge right across the board, I think. But as well as having a range of different ways of tackling the need to raise revenue, and clearly raising tax on the richest will be one way of doing that. I mean, if George Osborne is serious about saying we're all in this together, then how about us all paying proportionately for it? Let's also make sure that those who cause the problem pay the most for it. That might just lead you to a bit more progressive tax reform, which of course is nowhere on the agenda at all from this government. You might also decide to raise around £100 billion, it's been estimated, through tackling tax evasion, tax avoidance, unpaid tax. A number of us issued a report just last week showing that even by the government's figures, there are billions out there of uncollected tax, tax evasion, tax avoidance that simply aren't being cracked down on. Instead, what are we doing? Well, perversely what we're doing is going around closing tax offices up and down the country, throwing more people out of work, and actually reducing our ability to go after those people who are the rich people who are indeed evading the most of this kind of tax. Those are two things we could be doing, and the third thing, of course, we could be doing, which is the theme of tonight's debate, is to be not spending huge amounts of money on Trident, and it's about bringing the troops home. And when it comes to Afghanistan, as others have said, you know, it has been a terrible month as far as casualties are concerned. June's been the worst month for the NATO casualties since the war began. 10 British soldiers killed in the last 9 days, 66 died so far in 2010, more than double the 32 in the same period last year. And of course, when you try to find out how many Afghans have also been killed, the figures are much less precise, as you would imagine, because no one is really counting them but you can be very sure that there are many, many casualties on the Afghan side as well. And as others have said, for what? How do we really envisage this war ending? Everybody admits that sooner or later we're going to have to sit down and talk to the Taliban. Well, why not make that sooner? Why not make that before yet more lives have been lost, yet more tragedies have been unfolded both here and in Afghanistan itself? So this is an unwinnable war that is costing us £7 million a day. Instead of bringing peace, it's brought more violence. Instead of eradicating terror networks, it is simply very effectively spreading them and making it much, much harder to ever crack down on it. And the idea that you can somehow, bomb your way to peace, that you can bring democracy through the barrel of a gun, I think we should all know really has been, fundamentally dismissed really in reality, or it should have been. And the reality, of course, is that the more people you kill, the more people you will need to kill, because you will create even more anger and even more resentment for the many reasons that Paul outlined at the very beginning. So we need to bring our troops from Afghanistan. And then on Trident, this enormous white elephant that won't be discussed in the strategic defence review. And as a new member here, I put an amendment to the Queen's speech to try to suggest that it might be a good idea to consider Trident in the strategic defence review. The first thing that happened was on the first night we put the amendment, to my horror, because I don't understand yet the processes here, to my horror the Speaker just decided not to put it. I mean, to you lot that's normal, but to me it was a most enormous democratic affront, the idea that one Speaker can decide which amendments he puts. You try doing that in the European Parliament and you would be out. As it was, eventually he did take it on another day. We did get to put the amendment, and the Liberal Democrats did not support the amendment, and it fell, as you might imagine. But the arguments against Trident have been so well rehearsed. Let me just say a few last things about it. That it is unnecessary, that it is unsafe, and that it is incredibly uneconomic. We've heard just now from John how much better the money could be spent instead of putting it into Trident. If you were instead to put it into the real threats that we face, for example, climate change, then not only would you manage to get our emissions down enormously, not only would you get us away from this collision course we are on with a much bigger reality of climate change, which will put even any military campaign you care to look at in the shade when you look at the true impacts of unrestrained climate change, what that will mean. If we were to put this money into tackling climate change through energy efficiency, renewable energies, the kind of green investment bank we've just been hearing about, you would create hundreds of thousands of jobs as well. People in politics are always looking for win-wins. Here you've got a win-win-win. You've got the jobs, you've got the economy getting going again, and you've got reducing emissions. It all adds up. And the willful refusal to actually look at that seriously, I think, is absolutely shameful. And just some of the figures to show you what we're talking about here. In writing, 16 billion, just 16 billion of the total 80 billion that we're going to spend on Trident would insulate all 16 million homes in Britain that are currently uninsulated, saving 4% of UK carbon emissions, helping to prevent as well 20,000 annual cold-related deaths. 30 billion would provide 3,500 offshore turbines, supplying 15% of UK energy use. So, there are so many better ways of spending money that would have so many better consequences. And so all of our debate tonight, I think, can be summarised basically in fewer than 10 words: cut the war, scrap Trident, and bring the troops home.